The message arrived at dusk, when the city softened and the call to prayer drifted through, his open window like a memory trying to find its way home. His phone vibrated once on the desk. Unknown number, no text. Just an audio file. He almost deleted it. Elias had learned caution the hard way. At 37, he lived alone in a narrow apartment that smelled faintly of old books and black tea, a life arranged carefully to avoid surprises. He translated documents for a living, words passing through him without leaving marks. At night, he wrote letters he never sent. The recording was 6 minutes long. At first, there was only static and breathing. Then a woman's voice, thin and trembling, as if spoken through years of dust. "If you're listening to this, it means I couldn't find the courage to say it to your face." Elias froze. He recognized the voice immediately, not because he had heard it often, but because he had never forgotten it. Miriam, his sister. Gone 12 years ago without goodbye, without explanation, leaving behind a silence that had rearranged his bones. His chest tightened until breathing felt like betrayal. The voice continued, halting, punctured by long pauses. She spoke of mistakes, of fear, of love she didn't know how to carry. She said his name once, softly, like placing a hand on his shoulder. Then she said something that knocked the floor out from under him. "I need you to know the truth. About that night. About why I left. About what Father did." Elias dropped the phone. It clattered against the desk, the sound too loud in the quiet room. His hands began to shake. Not violently, but with the slow, insistent tremor of something waking up after years of sleep. Their father was dead. 5 years in the ground. Buried with honors, praised as a man of principle, a teacher who had shaped young minds. At the funeral, people had cried and hugged Elias, telling him how lucky he was to have such a father. Miriam had not been there. Elias picked up the phone with care, as if it might break. He replayed the message from the beginning, this time sitting on the floor, his back against the bed. Miriam spoke of the house they grew up in, of the creaking stairs and the lemon tree in the yard. She spoke of the night their mother was hospitalized, how Father had sent Elias to a neighbor's house to stay the night. She spoke of what happened after the door closed. Elias pressed his palms to his ears, but the words still found their way in. Each sentence rewrote a memory he had carried like a photograph, suddenly revealing what had been cropped out. "I was afraid to tell you," she said. "Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. Afraid it would destroy what little you had left." Her voice broke then, fully. She cried openly, without apology. Elias found himself crying too, though no sound came out. His tears fell silently, soaking into the carpet. At the end of the recording, Miriam said she was sick. That time was not being kind, that she didn't know if she would survive the year. She gave an address. A city across the border. She ended with words that hurt more than anything else. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to disappear again without the truth." The recording ended. For a long time, Elias did not move. When he finally stood, his legs felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. He walked to the sink and splashed water on his face. His reflection stared back at him, eyes red, mouth slack with grief that had no clear direction. That night he did not sleep. Memories rose uninvited, rearranging themselves, small moments that now felt weighted. Miriam locking her bedroom door. Her sudden silences. The way she flinched when Father raised his voice. Elias had been 16 then, too busy hating his own confusion, his own loneliness to see hers. By dawn, his decision had been made. The bus ride took 12 hours. Elias sat by the window, watching the landscape blur past, fields giving way to mountains, mountains dissolving into unfamiliar streets. He clutched a folded piece of paper with Miriam's address. The ink smudged from his sweating hands. He rehearsed conversations in his head, all of them inadequate. "I'm sorry. I should have known. Why didn't you tell me?" None of it felt right. When he finally reached the city, it was raining lightly, the kind that feels like a held breath. He found the building, old and narrow, its paint peeling like tired skin. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing. He knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. The door opened just enough for a face to appear. Miriam looked smaller than he remembered, her hair cut short, streaked with gray. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and for a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then she began to cry. Elias stepped forward without thinking, pulling her into his arms. She was thin, fragile, but warm. He felt her shoulders shake against his chest, felt the years between them collapse into that single moment. "I'm here," he whispered, though he didn't know what that meant yet. Inside, her apartment was sparse. A couch, a table, stacks of medical papers. They sat across from each other, hands wrapped around mugs of tea that had gone cold. "I thought you wouldn't come," Miriam said. "I thought I'd never forgive myself if I didn't," Elias replied. They talked for hours, words spilling out like water released from a dam. Miriam told him everything she had carried alone. Elias listened, his heart breaking and healing in the same breath. He told her about his life, the smallness of it, the way he had lived carefully, afraid of stepping on old landmines. "I always wondered why you never called," he said quietly. Miriam looked down. "I thought you were better without me." "I thought I was protecting you." Elias shook his head. "You don't get to decide who I can love." She smiled sadly. "I know that now." Days passed. Elias extended his stay, calling work with vague excuses that felt unimportant in the face of what mattered. He went with Miriam to her treatments, sat beside her in sterile rooms that smelled of disinfectant and quiet despair. He held her hand when the pain became too much. One evening, as they sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on, Miriam said, "I don't have much time." Elias swallowed. "How much?" "Weeks, maybe months." The words landed heavily, but this time he did not run from the weight. He nodded. "Then we'll use it." They began to talk about their childhood not as a crime scene, but as a shared history they could reclaim. They laughed about silly things, cried about others. Elias found himself telling her about the letters he wrote but never sent. Miriam asked to read one. One night her mother tucked her into bed, brushed the hair from her forehead, and whispered a promise that sounded ordinary at the time. "I'll always come back." By morning, the house was silent in a way that felt unnatural, like it was holding its breath. The cupboard doors were open, clothes missing, the air still carrying the faint scent of jasmine her mother loved. Her father sat at the table staring into a cold cup of tea, his face frozen, his voice empty when he said, "She's gone." No explanation followed. No stories softened the truth. Just absence. Years passed, and the absence hardened into something sharp. She learned not to ask questions because questions made people uncomfortable. Neighbors avoided her eyes. Teachers spoke gently as if her heart were fragile glass. She grew up believing abandonment was something you earned, like a punishment for being unlovable. Her father worked long hours and spoke little. At night, she would lie awake listening to the walls creak, imagining footsteps that never came. She promised herself she would never need anyone enough to be left behind. When she was 26, her father died quietly in his sleep. The grief felt familiar, almost rehearsed. While sorting through his belongings, she found a small locked box hidden behind old books. Inside was a worn diary wrapped in cloth, the pages yellowed and trembling in her hands. It was her mother's. She hesitated before opening it, afraid of what truth might undo the story she had lived with for nearly 2 decades. But curiosity outweighed fear. The first entry was dated 3 weeks before her mother disappeared. "I don't know how to say goodbye to my child without breaking her forever." Her breath caught. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, and kept reading. The diary told a story she had never imagined. Her mother had been sick. Not the kind of sickness that announces itself loudly, but the quiet kind that eats away at you slowly. The doctors had been clear. Treatment was expensive, uncertain, and long. Her father had begged her mother to try anyway, but the cost would have destroyed them, their home, their child's future.